So, hello and welcome to the Still We Rise podcast series. So, today I'm joined by Victor Mujakachi, who's from South Yorkshire Migration Action Group. So, welcome, Victor.
Welcome and thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So, talk to us about SYMAAG and the causes that it's fighting. Why was it set up?
SYMAAG, that's an acronym for South Yorkshire Migration Action Asylum Group. This is a Sheffield-based organization set up a decade ago. Its main aims when it was originally set up was to advocate and champion for better accommodation for asylum seekers. Those asylum seekers who are housed in home office supported accommodation. It became quite apparent as the dispersal policy took off that most asylum seekers would be housed in inadequate asylum accommodation.
Okay, so just so our audience understand, so when you say dispersal policies, this is the Home Office when someone arrives here to come and claim sanctuary. They send them out to different cities. So there's local authorities who accept asylum seekers. And so there's housing provision provided. So you're saying that this housing was inadequate?
Precisely so. The dispersal policy operates on the basis that when an asylum seeker comes in and they claim asylum, they are categorized as a homeless individual, or if it's a family, that family is homeless, which is true to quite a large extent, because when they come in, they don't have anywhere to stay. Right. But then the government, through the dispersal policy that I've just mentioned, they send them to other regions, possibly regions outside the places where they would have claimed asylum. And the government then works in conjunction with local authorities to provide suitable accommodation to house asylum seekers whilst they are processing their asylum claims. Or they can signpost them to service providers who provide accommodation, and these accommodation places where the asylum seekers are then housed through private companies.
Ah, right. Yeah. Okay. So what sort of conditions were people living in? What prompted you to start campaigning?
So it became quite apparent that when the government changed its policy in terms of dispersal of housing asylum seekers, because initially housing used to be provided by local authorities, councils. This was changed where councils lost the contract to house asylum seekers to private companies, because private companies provided cheaper alternatives in terms of their budgets and submissions. It became evident that cheap didn't mean good quality. And most of these asylum seekers were housed in structurally unsound properties, where the amenities were not adequate, and we started getting complaints from asylum seekers housed in those accommodation places that the standards that they expected were fell short to those that you would adequately house an ordinary human being.
Okay.
Especially where children were concerned, there were safety concerns, sticking out electric wires, blockages, and issues like that. And this is where SYMAAG came in.
Right, okay. So their health and safety sounds like the conditions are quite hazardous.
they were hazardous, and there were also health and safety concerns.
So, what actions has SYMAAG taken? And because we're talking about solidarity knows no borders and trying to build solidarity in your community in Sheffield, what actions has SYMAAG taken, and how can people join those?
So, solidarity is the key word. SYMAAG then, in the light of that, the realization that they were getting information about inadequate housing, substandard housing, started acting in solidarity, to borrow your phrase, with the occupants of those temporary occupants, because they were there for a temporary period only. In solidarity with them, so that they would help them and advocate and campaign on their behalf for them to get proper accommodation. This was attempting to assist them, to help them, so that they could get a fair deal from the Home Office. Because what they were getting was an unfair deal. They were supposed to be getting proper accommodation as human beings, but in the end, they discovered that they were really being shortchanged by the private contractors who were supposed to provide them with proper accommodation.
Okay, and how can people in Sheffield join in with your cause?
We get our funding from donations, fundraising, and what have you. We do campaigns in solidarity with those people whom we feel are being given a raw deal, particularly asylum seekers, because those are marginalized members of our societies. Most of them just operate under the radar. People don't know that these things are happening to them. The public at large don't realize that asylum seekers, when they get this type of accommodation, it's substandard and inadequate. So we invite them to our meetings, because we also have got a publicity secretary and a website where they can get information about the campaigns and the work that we do in solidarity with asylum seekers, and where they can channel their complaints. And we also invite them to our meetings, and requesting them to give an account of their experiences, which is helpful. We've got an academic with whom we work, who does research on behalf of people seeking asylum, and this researcher gets all the information about inadequate housing, and he turns all that information into academic document, presentations of which have been made to universities and even to Parliament. So we work with people along those lines, so that we can provide them with as much help as we can, and we've scored quite a lot of successes in that regard.
Right, and more broadly, looking at the national picture, would you say that people who are outside of Sheffield are suffering the same, challenges regarding their housing? Because we've seen the way that the Home Secretary has moved towards institutionalized accommodation. So places like Napier Barracks and Penally, is that another frontier where your campaigns might actually start going to now, outside of Sheffield, to try and stop that kind of accommodation, coming up across the country?
Our campaign at the moment is local. It's rather localized. But from the work we've been doing over the years, we've found ourselves on the national spotlight, because we work in collaboration with organizations like NACOM. We work with organizations like These Walls Must Fall. We work with organizations that are against immigration detention of unfair immigration detention of refugees, of asylum seekers. So that has sort of broadened our perspective. As to your question whether we can go national, what normally happens is the people who we support in their campaigns and advocate for come from outside Sheffield. They find themselves in Sheffield, and this is where we start working with them. There are other organizations that do similar work, but we work with them as much as possible. But at the moment, our work is based purely in Sheffield. However, we collaborate with organizations that seek to improve accommodation of asylum seekers at national level. We've done that in terms of campaign and taking part in activities where national events are called for, and we are asked to attend and take part in those events.
Okay. And finally, Victor, let's look at the general outlook of migration policy in the country. There's a new Nationality and Borders Bill, which is before Parliament now. And we've seen a lot of people arriving by boat across the channel. And it's a really precarious time for a lot of people. What are SYMAAG's views on what's happening in Britain and the direction of travel regarding refugees?
I believe we are talking about what is commonly known as the immigration plan, which I believe is going to be, it's a frightening piece of legislation if it becomes law. And SYMAAG and other organizations who are similarly minded are very concerned. It's now a bill, and with the government's majority, it may well be law. But SYMAAG and other organizations are very concerned. They are not sitting on their laurels. They are taking part in campaigns, making representations to the lawmakers, to local members of parliament, to petition against the bill. It's in the way that the bill is fashioned out. We are very concerned that most of its provisions are unworkable, and they should either be amended or the bill itself be discarded in its entirety. Because this notion, to pick one aspect of it, where migrants or refugees or asylum seekers are categorized in two groups as good asylum seekers and bad asylum seekers, is totally unworkable on the basis of the migratory route that they take. That is never going to happen, and that is never going to work. So SYMAAG and other organizations are working as much and as hard as possible to petition lawmakers to take everybody who is similarly minded on board, to try as much as possible highlight the issues and the concerns that we are getting from other organizations and people who are affected, that this is a very punitive bill and its provisions are totally unworkable.
Right. No, Victor, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.